Hey everyone, this is Adam Elenbaas from Nightlight Astrology. Today we are going to take a look at Uranus's entrance into Gemini from another fresh perspective. I've got 5 things for you to watch for today. Actually, technically, I have 15 things for you to watch for. I've got 3 different sub lists of 5 things to watch for. So anyway, this is kind of experimental as well. I feel like that's appropriate for Uranus's entrance into Gemini, that I would get sort of a little like experimental with my formatting, but it's also out of necessity. Those of you who watch the channel know that we had a total technological snafu because the power went out in our house one night. There were tornadoes. I made a week worth of content before realizing that my microphone was fried and literally none of the audio conveyed because that mic is set as my default mic and we lost everything. So I've been recreating a week's worth of content in a very short period of time. There's been some filler episodes this week. I apologize. Everything should be back to normal next week. Thank you for your patience. It really means a lot to me. Before we get into it today, don't forget to like and subscribe. It really does help us grow. You can find transcripts of any of these daily talks on the website, which is nightlightastrology.com. Head over to Nightlight. And one thing that I want to point out for you right away, go to the live events page. You will see the schedule for my monthly webinars between now and the end of the year are listed. And this Thursday night, I'm giving a talk on the 9th house. We're going to talk about the 9th house in depth. And I'm going to share with you a little bit about the Indian perspective, which considers the 9th house to be one of the areas of our chart where some of our best karma resides. Why is that the case? And also just let's learn more about the 9th house in our birth charts. So if you want to, you can register and you'll get the link to attend the live webinar. If you can't make it live, you get the recording and replay later. I hope to see you there. This Monday, I had, as again, a matter of necessity, I shared an old webinar from about a year ago that I did previewing Uranus's entrance into Gemini. So if you want a sample of what one of my webinars look like, look no further than this Monday's replay of a webinar I did last year on Uranus and Gemini. Anyway, on that note, Uranus's entrance into Gemini kicks off our week. We did a little Venus in profile episode yesterday. Venus and Gemini got into the mix. So it's been a really Gemini kind of start to this content creation week. But what I want to do today is I want to share with you, I have 3 lists of 5. And I thought I'd get experimental, and I'm going to give you 5 mythological characters that I think really nicely represent Uranus and Gemini. I am going to give you 5 mythological characters, and then I am going to give you 5 literary characters. I have a background in English language and literature, my master's degree in, and I love reading. So I'm going to give you some literary characters, and then I'm going to leave you with 5 film characters. I think that each of these characters nicely represents the energy, the light and dark of Uranus and Gemini. So I thought this would be fun. And this is one of the content pieces that I'm redoing this week because I loved it so much. I didn't have time to redo the content for all the week, but I did redo this one. So I hope you'll enjoy it. Let's get into it. So 5 mythological characters. Let's start with the most obvious, which is Hermes. Hermes is the natural ruler of the sign of Gemini. So you can't talk about mythological characters with Uranus and Gemini without saying, look, if you wanted to summarize what kind of character, god, goddess, mythological figure is most closely embodying Uranus and Gemini as a transit, it's Hermes, the trickster, the inventor, the communicator, a god of inventions, a god that is movable and encourages a kind of rebelliousness even. Hermes Mercury, in his inventiveness and boundary-breaking intellectual feats, is very Uranian. In fact, many modern astrologers would say that Uranus is like a higher octave of Mercury, Hermes. I don't personally use the octaves in my own practice, but the point is that many astrologers have noted the similarities between Hermes and Uranus, and that's not, that's not untrue. There's a lot that they share in common, particularly their flashy, brilliant, eccentric, inventive qualities. So how could we start talking about this without mentioning the most obvious, which is Hermes? Number 2 on my list of mythological characters is Prometheus. Now, this is also like so obvious because like modern astrologer Richard Tarnas has said, and many people have mirrored, and so it's very common at this point. It's maybe the most fitting mythological character that actually describes the archetype of Uranus as an astrological symbol. The reason for that is that the Greek god Uranus doesn't closely resemble the astrological symbolism of the planet as much as Prometheus does. This is the idea that Richard Tarnas put forth that's become quite popular. So many people talk about Uranus now as Promethean as a result of that. Prometheus steals the fire from the gods. He's a transgressive character that breaks rules, limits, wants to free people who are stuck with only a superficial or limited amount of wisdom and understanding compared to the gods. He gets punished as a result. The original, inventive, transgressive, rebellious qualities of Prometheus, as well as the emphasis on the advancement of knowledge, wisdom, breakthroughs and insights and inventiveness, originality, all very Promethean. So these two characters start off my list, not super original. Any of you listening to this who know a bit of astrology should be like, yeah, Hermes and Prometheus makes total sense for Uranus and Gemini. Now it gets a little bit more interesting. Number 3 on my list of mythological characters is Odin. I'm not a huge expert on Norse myth, but I will say that Odin's self-sacrifice in order to gain runes, which is kind of like language and magic, is in its own way very Promethean and very Hermes-like, but in a totally different mythological realm. Odin pursues knowledge, magic, language with, like Prometheus, a kind of transgressive, self-sacrificing penalty or like cost that he pays to get that knowledge. Odin nicely represents the magical, mystical, rational combinations that Uranus in the sign of Hermes represents. So if you want a parallel figure to study and look into that could be really interesting while Uranus is transiting Gemini, check out Odin from Norse myth. Now, the Egyptian equivalent of Hermes, if Odin is sort of like Prometheus, the Egyptian equivalent of Hermes is Thoth. This mythological character, like Hermes, is associated with writing, speech, wisdom, riddles, intellect, paradox, communication, and inventiveness. In fact, in the Hermetic tradition, Hermes and Thoth are conflated, or Hermes is said to sort of be a transmission of Thoth, or yeah, they're sort of one and the same in the Hermetic tradition. So Thoth would be another deity if you wanted over the course of the next 7 years to include in your altar, on your altar, or get to know through reading a little literature or some of the stories of Thoth. Even the Hermetica, I've done a series on my channel. If you search my playlists, the Hermetica series that I did gets pretty in-depth with respect to the character of both Hermes and Thoth. So these are all mythological characters that are closely sort of entwined with the mandala that Uranus and Gemini represents. Now, the next one I'm going to totally slaughter the pronunciation of, but Tezcatlipoca. It's Aztec. I actually learned about this mythological character many years ago when I got interested in Aztec and Mayan mythology. Tezcatlipoca, I'm totally saying that wrong. I wish I knew how to pronounce it. Anyhow, is a trickster god and very much like prone to dualities and disruptive changes, conflict through deception and chaos. So this deity is very much you know what? I'm going to spell it out. So if you want to look it up, you can. There it is. So this is Aztec, and a really fascinating deity, not one that I'm like super familiar with, but I know enough about to know that deception, chaos, transformation, closely associated with deception and chaos and duality and sudden changes all in the realm of this figure who I first learned about back when I got into the Mayan calendar mythology back in the day. So it's been a long time since I've spent any time with that figure, but I highly recommend it, again, just as something that I think closely relates to the Uranus in Gemini symbolism. Okay, well, I'm again not a mythological expert by any means, so have fun with that. Next on my list, 5 film characters. These I think everyone should be, or no, 5 literary characters comes next. Sorry. These everyone should be familiar with a few of them. Some of them maybe not as much, but so when I was in graduate school, I had to read Faust by Goethe. Mephistopheles in Faust is a character who's a trickster that tempts Faust with incredible sort of intellectual power and knowledge combined. And he is a morally ambivalent and morally deceptive kind of character. So Mephistopheles in Faust is a very Uranus in Gemini figure. Not that any of you are going to necessarily read Faust, but if you have, this is a thoroughly Uranus and Gemini character from a very well-known sort of book. Now, I had to read it in graduate school. It's not like I would probably read this if I wasn't made to read it. So I can't necessarily recommend it because, again, it's kind of dense. But if any of you do know that character or want to look into that character, check out Mephistopheles. Now, the next one, I really think a lot of you will know, although I have to admit, saying I haven't read these books, I have only seen the film version of the books. And this one is Luna Lovegood from Harry Potter. Luna Lovegood is quirky, misunderstood, unconventional, kind of weird, like a weirdo. But she's also brilliant and has this very quirky brilliance to her. She is such a Uranus and Gemini character. If you know Luna Lovegood, or if you have seen the Harry Potter movies, you'll see her. She is, I think, a really good representation of the brilliance, but the sort of unconventional mindedness of Uranus and Gemini. Another one on my list is Don Quixote, another book I had to read in graduate school. This is someone who is sort of like he's tilting at windmills in his mind. He is a super mental, imaginative, kind of swashbuckling figure, but he's at times lost in self-deception, a sort of detachment from reality. He's brilliant, but he's also quirky and like his feet aren't on the ground. I think you could go in the direction of Neptune with Don Quixote as well, but I really think that the playfulness, the childlike, quirky, unconventional, rebellious, non-feet on the ground qualities are a pretty good match of Uranus and Gemini with Don Quixote. Now, the next one on my list is the Cheshire Cat. This one, my girls love, obviously, from the film, the old school Disney cartoon film. Kind of has some similarities with the moon, I think. The Cheshire Cat, its grin looks like the moon, but Moon and Mercury share mutability, changeability in common. The Cheshire Cat speaks in riddles, paradoxes, is a figure of enigma, and he is kind of chaotic, but like a psychopomp. So I think the Cheshire Cat has a lot of Gemini features. In fact, I think like cats in general are sort of like Gemini. But Uranus and Gemini and the brilliant, unconventional way that the Cheshire Cat acts as like a sphinx and a guide of Alice's soul through Wonderland. A lot of Uranus and Gemini there. A lot of Uranus and Gemini. And I think it's important to emphasize almost like the magician, riddling, cat-like qualities of Uranus and Gemini, because we don't want to limit Uranus and Gemini to just being like digital, technological, mental. It can be very magical, very enigmatic, but the Cheshire Cat is enigmatic and magical and still very like brilliant. And then finally, another book that I had to read in graduate school, Catcher in the Rye, Holden Caulfield. erratic, iconoclastic, rebellious, very, very mental character. Kind of a dark side in terms of some of the anarchy and the moral ambiguities and iconoclasm and sort of wayward, erratic, restless qualities that Holden Caulfield embodies in Catcher in the Rye. If you haven't read that book and you want like a really interesting view of Uranus and Gemini, I think you'll enjoy that one. All right, finally, I have 5 film characters for you. These are from films that I like. If you don't like them, use it as a template to maybe find other matches, right? But I think of V from the movie V for Vendetta, who is a philosophical rebel, and he uses thoughts and ideas and speech to invoke a revolutionary energy. So that's a simple one. Of course, The Matrix comes to my mind, and I think probably Neo, but you could go in the direction of Morpheus. The challenges to consensus reality that break our understanding of ourselves and reality through some kind of illusion. So that breaking and shattering of illusions through awakening and mental understanding. Oh, this is a matrix. It's like a binary code and I'm caught up in it. To me, the awakening of Neo and the guidance of Morpheus feels like Hermes, Prometheus. That movie to me feels very Uranus and Gemini. We recently at my house, we watched the movie Amelie, movie I've seen many times, hadn't seen it in about a decade at least, rewatched it recently, and I thought, this is Uranus and Gemini. She's eccentric, she's quirky, she's kind of like Luna Lovegood a little bit. But she also has this way of trickster interventions in all of these strangers' lives that she's quietly observing, and she's intervening to disrupt their life with quirky little joyfulness. It's a great movie. If you've never seen it, Amelie, check it out. I think Audrey Tautou is the name of the actress. But anyhow, I feel her character Amelie is the very kind of childlike, brilliant, playful, quirky, eccentric, and like slightly trickster vibe that she has in that movie. The next one, it's too obvious, but it's the Joker. I think you look at Heath Ledger's character, especially for me, The Dark Knight. I see the Joker as a chaotic agent of destabilization, morally ambiguous, disruption, double meanings, paradox, tricks, deception, maybe run amok in the direction of anarchy, and especially due to almost dismissal of moral categories altogether, seeing their existence as somehow hypocritical or unimaginative. The Joker is a very Uranus and Gemini-like character. Sorry to say, but it's kind of a dark one, but I think it fits. Finally, one of my favorite movies of all time is Good Will Hunting. And Matt Damon's character, Will Hunting, is very Uranus and Gemini in the sense of being someone who's very brilliant, but also troubled mentally and emotionally. That movie is as much about his working through emotional, mental health issues as it is about his incredible intellectual brilliance. And I think those two things pair together nicely in the sign of with Uranus and Gemini. We're going to be looking at advancements in mind right alongside of advancements in our understanding of things like mental and emotional health. So, yeah, remember during the 1940s when Uranus was in Gemini, all of the breakthroughs in the field of psychology were happening. We got to know post-traumatic stress syndrome for the thing that it is. So anyway, the original version of this was longer, more fleshed out. I'm so sorry that this week it just completely went off the rails, but I thought it would be fun. And this talk was really supposed to be like in the spirit of Uranus and Gemini. Let's play with my normal categories and reach into film, fiction, and myth for some characters that can get us thinking a little differently about this archetype. So on that note, I hope this was useful for you. We'll be taking a look at the full moon in Capricorn tomorrow. So between now and then, I hope you have a good one. Bye.